What's up, guys? Matt Stone here with another update. Trump has been spouting some very cryptic things about the possibility of just letting this thing run its course. Um, to some degree, he may just be kind of admitting defeat, saying that, we just can't contain this. But I don't think Trump is up for the real fight to stamp this thing all the way out, because it's going to be total economic shutdown for several months, and then it's going to linger on for who knows how many months after that before we finally get to where there's no more active cases. You really got to get to zero on the active cases before you can feel 100% confident turning everybody loose again out in the world to behave like they normally behave. And even then, you still can't allow anybody in the country from somewhere else if there's still active cases somewhere in the world. I mean, it's pretty, it's a really virulent disease, and it's going to take a monumental, grandiose effort to contain it. And I think he's serious. I mean, I think he really is seriously considering that as a possibility. So I just want to run some calculations and see what that looks like. Um, and see what we're up against. I think what the main thing that we're all concerned about is how many deaths. That's really what we're weighing. We're finding out what the true value of an elderly person is. Now, the vast majority of mortalities have been people over the age of 70. Most of the stats in the world, if you're looking at age demographics, will show the population 65 and older. In the United States, there's 51 million people that are 65 and older. So we're talking about, a lot of people. Italy gets a lot of grief for being this country that's so old. And, Europe in general, their population is 18% over the age of 65. The United States is a little bit lower than that, but we still have a really high number overall, 51 million. That's a lot of lives that you're putting in jeopardy and putting at stake and putting up potentially is coronavirus food. So let's talk about it. First of all, let's calculate the growth rate that we're seeing now amongst, some effort. I mean, I think our efforts are pretty weak. You could almost say that they're non-efforts. But let me bust out the old calculator. And let's do a little bit of math here. I just want to get a lot of people have trouble comprehending the overall, like an exponential growth or logarithmic growth. It seems like their brain doesn't really work that way. When tomorrow the new cases are like, 12,000 or 11,000, it's just going to be like, wow, what a big jump. But it actually is expected. So the day is not done reporting. This number is going to get up to 10,000, which means that 53,655 minus the 10,000 means we're at like 43.6 yesterday. So you're going to take the 53,655 of today, and then you just divide that by yesterday's total of the 43,655, roughly, and then you get a total of 1.23. Now, 1.23 is a really, really high growth factor. Okay, I don't use this calculator much for calculating this, but let's go over here. 53,000, 53,655 times our growth rate of 1.23. Okay. What you do to calculate this is you pop an exponent on the outside of the growth rate here, and let's type in 30 days. What does 30 days of growth look like? This is March 24th. Currently, I'm recording this, so we're talking about April 23rd, basically. And we've got a total of, it's already, spread to 26.7 million people at that point. So we're going to go from 53,000 to 26.7 million. Again, this is based on just confirmed cases. We don't know how many unconfirmed cases there are. That's the big missing piece in any equation that you try to run, and nobody knows the answer to that. And a lot of people are using the unknown number of unconfirmed cases to try to to try to downgrade the significance of this. Hopefully, Trump doesn't end up giving in to that, because this is going to just rip through people really hard. Okay, so we have, let's say 30 days from now, we got 26.7 million confirmed cases. We may give up on even testing, trying to get confirmed cases, but we're saying, it's proportional to what we're seeing now. 26.7 million. So that's really a lot. And if we go through and we look at the most optimistic stats that we've seen so far, China, well, I guess South Korea has better overall numbers, and much of that can probably be attributed to two things. It was mostly an outbreak of young people, and number two, they tested absolutely everybody, so there really probably weren't any unconfirmed cases out there. They were able to identify everybody that had it, and that's how they were able to contain it. And I think that's what you have to do to contain it. But if you look at China's numbers, China's got a mortality rate now that's risen to 4.4%, based on every case that's had an outcome. So we'll multiply that by 0.044. And that gives us a total of 1.17. That's 1,175,482. Are you ready for this many people, almost all of them over the age of 70? Are you ready for this many people to die in the next 30 days so that we can perpetuate a fake economy that would be propped up just as well by basically just firing liquidity into the markets and giving people money? A lot of Austrian economists out there might disagree with that, but that's exactly what we did during the last crash, and it actually worked. There wasn't runaway hyperinflation, and they were able to contain that, and they were able to contain it without really even raising interest rates very high. They have that instrument to prevent hyperinflation, which is the fear of the government just printing money and giving it to people. I really wish they would just put it directly into people's hands instead of trying to give it to the businesses, hoping that the businesses will keep their employees, employed and keep hiring them. Anyway, I could go off and probably will soon on a tangent about the way our economy works and why we can get through this without worrying about jobs. The jobs aren't important. What's important is that people get money. That's the only reason you have a job in the first place, is so that you can have money. And if you can pay your rent with that money, and then your landlord can pay their mortgage with that money, and the homeowners can pay their mortgages, and everybody can pay their cell phone bill, and they can buy food, and they can do all those things, then the economy stays relatively afloat. And we just need money to do that. That's not that big of a deal. Anyway, I won't go off on that in this video, but that's, I think, what we're looking at just in 30 days. We could do calculations beyond that, and it just gets, the numbers get astronomical. But I think there's probably a lot of these unconfirmed cases, so 1 to 10 million maybe is probably what we're looking at in terms of total deaths of people 70 years and older. Yes, there's going to be some deaths of people under 70, especially people who already have health conditions, but that's the general outlook. Last thing I wanted to talk in this video, just because a friend of mine sent me this and wanted to get my thoughts on it, and it just kind of continues our conversation. A lot of people are quoting this because I've seen it all over, but this is Swiss doctor on COVID-19. Okay, a Swiss medical doctor, blah, 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 the following. Okay, according to the latest data of the Italian National Health Institute, the average age of the positively tested deceased in Italy is currently about 81 years. 10% of the deceased are over 90, 90% are over 70. Okay. 80% of the deceased had suffered from 2 or more chronic diseases. 50% of the deceased had suffered from 3 or more chronic diseases. The chronic diseases include, in particular, cardiovascular problems, diabetes, respiratory problems, and cancer. Again, I'm not sure why this is a big factor. I mean, who over 70 years old doesn't have some kind of chronic health problem? I'm 42 and I've got respiratory problems. My girlfriend's mom is like 63. She had a heart attack last year. So, so what? Like, just because they're old, yeah, it puts them at higher risk. But I think a lot of people are looking at this saying, "Oh, these people are going to die anyway," or we don't know if they died we don't know if the diabetes killed them or if it was coronavirus. They could have died from a heart attack, and they would have blamed it on coronavirus. You're seeing a lot of people trying to, um, you know, wish reality away by whisk the seriousness of coronavirus away by throwing out things like that. Okay, less than 1% of the deceased were healthy persons. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, not many people are healthy. Just because somebody's not healthy doesn't mean that we're just going to let them die. If that was the case, why have a medical system at all? Why treat any disease? Okay, only about 30% of the deceased are women. We know that coronavirus is a raging feminist. She hates dudes. I think that's definitely, I don't know. There's probably multiple things going on, but definitely men have been dying at a higher rate than women. So you got that going for you, ladies. The Italian Institute of Health, moreover, distinguishes between those who died from the coronavirus and those who died with the coronavirus. In many cases, it is not yet clear whether the persons died from the virus or from their pre-existing chronic disease or a combination of both. Okay? Doesn't matter. If they wouldn't have died without the coronavirus and then they got the coronavirus and did die, I'm going to go ahead and pin that on coronavirus, guys. And it's true that, a certain number of people die every day all over the world. I know that in Bergamo in Italy, where it's been hardest hit, I think it was normal for about 100 people to die. And that was about the capacity of like the funeral parlors and whatnot. And then they've had like 700, 800 already, with thousands more expected. So just in a small town of 120,000 people. So we know that it's increased the overall number of people dying. That's why, well, you'll see later. I'll show you something. Hope I don't forget. 2 Italians deceased under 40, both 39 years old, were a cancer patient and a diabetes patient. Okay, we don't necessarily need to kill off everybody with cancer and diabetes that are 39 years old, and then say, well, you shouldn't have had cancer. It's like almost like a Christian Scientist point of view with this. In these cases, too, the exact cause of death was not yet clear. Well, they probably wouldn't have died from diabetes at age 39 if they hadn't had coronavirus. The partial overloading of the hospitals is due to the general rush of patients and the increased number of patients requiring special intensive care. In particular, the aim is to stabilize respiratory function in severe cases to provide antiviral therapies. Doctor also points out the following aspects. Oldest population, worst air quality. Well, Spain's having the same death rate, and they're younger and have better air quality. Which has already led to an increased number of respiratory diseases and deaths in the past and is likely an additional risk factor for the current epidemic. South Korea, much milder course than Italy. Again, we've talked about that. It could be to their more stringent testing and there being no unconfirmed cases, and the fact that they were younger people. And it could, the first thing I said is that, hey, maybe it has something to do with their Asian, because we're seeing the same thing in Japan, we're seeing the same thing in China, lower death rates than anywhere in Europe. Okay, the approximately 12 test positive Swiss deaths so far were also high-risk patients. That was in Switzerland. Switzerland is getting hit pretty bad. It's not, a huge outbreak yet, but the growth rates are really high and the death rate is pretty high. Furthermore, according to a first Chinese study, the internationally used virus test kits may give a false positive. I hear this all the time. False positives, guys. False positives. These test results are false positives. In these cases, the persons may not have contacted the new coronavirus, but presumably one of the many existing human coronaviruses that are part of the annual and currently ongoing common cold and flu epidemics. So to me, that's kind of a bad sign. If we thought that China had if we thought that they had 81,000 cases, but really they were only 40,000 cases, and they had 3,000 and something die of it, oh, well, then the death rate is actually 2 or 3 times higher than we thought it was. Thus, the most important indicator for judging the danger of the disease is not the frequently reported number of positively tested persons in death, but the number of persons actually and unexpectedly developing or dying from pneumonia. Okay? According to all current data, for the healthy general population of school and working age, a mild to moderate course of COVID-19 disease can be expected. Senior citizens and persons with existing chronic diseases should be protected. The medical capacity should be optimally prepared, whatever. So, let's go and look at my recent communication with Brian. For those who didn't watch my other videos, Brian actually knew the person who was patient zero in Italy. He's Italian. He's my business partner. I communicate with him all the time. I keep sending these messages. March 17th, how are you doing? How are you holding up? Man, I think I think about you constantly. So sick of seeing my pathetic countrymen thinking this is some big hoax for the government to control us or something. Or 5G, that's my favorite conspiracy. So it took him a week to respond because things are so bad over there that he can't even respond. Okay, let's read what he said. Hey man, wow, it's been a very eventful few days. Sorry for being MIA. The situation here is really tragic. Tell me if this sounds like the flu, guys. Tell me if you want this to come to your town. Tell me if you want this to happen to your grandparents. The death toll keeps climbing, and we've had 790 dead in the last 24 hours alone. Yes, I refresh the stats constantly, I know. Here's a good one. Every time I open Facebook, I see that someone I know has died. The sound of ambulances is constantly playing in the background. Scary shit. I had somebody write to me saying, oh, this is nothing. It's just a cough and a fever. Don't worry about it. 98% recovery rate. Oh, by the way, the first patient in Oregon was a 90-year-old lady and she didn't die from it, so it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. I keep hearing bad things about Italy, but until I see, piles of bodies or videos of, ambulances constantly playing in the background, I'm just not buying it. Okay? And then, pitch some kind of wild conspiracy theory at me about how this is we're going to drain the swamp and there's going to be my favorite martial law. I love that. If somebody, you can always tell somebody they forgot to get off. They were on the bus somewhere. They were on the bus that travels from Zeitgeist movie to Alex Jones, and they forgot to get off on their stop. Their stop was somewhere between those 2 points on that bus ride, and they forgot to get off. Martial law is the calling card of these people who maybe fell asleep and just missed their stop. Anyway, the government has now shut down pretty much all businesses except for food-related companies and pharmacies. We're not allowed to leave our homes unless it's absolutely necessary. We've got police everywhere, and even the military patrolling the roads. If you're stopped and you don't have a good reason for being out, you get a big fine and sometimes even arrested. See, this is the government. They just want to control you, man. Thankfully, my family, this is a psyop. I love that. Please leave as many comments as possible talking about a psyop, like a psychological operation. But you got to use the lingo, though. You got to call it a psyop. That's like, shows that you're like hip to the lingo that's being tossed around over there by all the awakened ones. Thankfully, my family and I are all okay. We're all scared and starting to turn paranoid, but we try to keep sane nevertheless. The fact that they closed all businesses and offices meant that a load of people have now been asked to smart work from home, and of course, with our Stone Age internet connection, the internet keeps going down with the extra load it cannot carry. What can I say? Never seen anything like this. Hope it goes away soon, though the signs are not very encouraging. So that's what's going on in Italy. They are taking lots of measures to try to slow this down, and yet we see it's still expanding. Now, they've flattened their curve. This is really exciting for Italy. It's showing that the interventions that they're doing, these lockdowns, this psyop that they've got going on over there, is actually slowing down. You see that tiny little curve on the end there? That is the rate of spread slowing down. Daily new cases Today was about 5,000, so it's not reported yet. It's somewhere in there. And so it's not just going up like this, it's starting to tail off. Active cases are starting to just slowly turn. You can see that tiny little curve in the other direction. Again, today's not reported. Death toll, tiny little bit of a curve. It's going to go up again today with the death toll over 700. But, it's just evidence that Italy really shows us everything we need to know about this, right? Which is that it's a huge clusterfuck, and it's capable of really just completely wiping out the elderly population in a town. And it also shows us that if we work really hard together in a unified way, we come together and we all, just ditch the old conspiracy theories and stop worrying about the government trying to Turk our gerbs. We can actually beat this. We can actually turn this around, and this doesn't have to end up being the GRANPAcolypse.